Hello, Serie A fan. Rise and shine, campers. It's Groundhog Day. Zlatan dumps Gattuso in to give themselves a mountain to climb, and Juve are back on track for a 10th consecutive title. But not everything's the same. Roma are challenging for the league, CVC are buying the league, and Lazio star in airplane free. All that and more in this episode of Scudetto. Hello and welcome to Scudetto. It's late November, Milan are top of the league. Everyone's talking about Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Conte's angry again. On the face of it, not that much has changed, but still plenty to talk about. We'll get into some detail shortly, but in a word, Boaz, are you allowing yourself to get excited yet?
In a word, no.
Fair enough. I'll give you some more words shortly. How are you getting on otherwise, and what sort of beer have you got this evening?
Everything is pretty good. We're starting to get into what I would call winterish here. It's getting a little bit colder, not as cold as you Nordic people, but I'm wearing a hoodie as opposed to a t-shirt.
Yeah, when you said it was cold, I was not having 18 degrees as...
It feels like 16, guys. Come on, like a little bit of credit. But again, I'm used to warmer climes. But I'm having a tropical IPA, which is a mango tasting IPA. It's actually the very last beer that's left in my house. So it's kind of a miracle bottle that I found at the back of the fridge. Hallelujah.
I mean, it's quite low effort, but considering that I've not managed to secure a beer again, I'm not sure I'm in any place to criticize. I missed, again, the deadline of 9 p.m. for buying a beer in Finland, so I'm on the gin and tonic. Apologies to all of the fans.
Yeah, I just want to put on record that I am very, very disappointed in you, Oscar. Again.
I did suggest you should buy some beers in advance, but apparently you can't resist when you have alcohol in the house and you have to get rid of it all.
I even did the research and sent you guys a picture of the beer that I wanted to buy.
You did.
So hopefully that features next week. Kenny, have you got a beer that you can redeem the podcast with?
I do. I actually went all the way to the shop to buy a beer, especially for this podcast, which has a beer element to it. But yeah, I bought a beer called Disco Forklift Truck. It's a mango pale ale, sticking with that theme of going for things that sound a little bit different. And it's by a brewery called Drygate Brewing Company. They are based in Glasgow. So I'll let you know how I get on with that one.
Good stuff. Looking forward to hearing about that. Right, let's start with Napoli-Milan. So obviously Napoli won Milan 3, and the first time in 10 years that Milan have won in Napoli. Since the last time that Zlatan was at Milan, I've just been informed by Kenny. Boaz, how good were Milan in this game? What did you make of it?
So Zlatan actually scored in that last game Milan won 10 years ago. And here he is 10 years later, and Gennaro Gattuso says that 40-year-old Zlatan is better than 30-year-old Zlatan. It's impossible not to talk about this game without focusing on the big man up front. Not only did he score 2 goals, but also his contribution to the team as a whole in this game was splendid. As I think I mentioned in a couple of past podcasts, that despite getting the goals, and he's now scored in 8 consecutive games, if I'm not mistaken, but despite getting the goals, maybe he was a little bit sloppy with his passing, and he was getting a little bit too frustrated with his teammates. In this game, he was in high spirits. He was encouraging the much younger team around him. And, he scored 2 really good goals.
Outstanding, wasn't he? What was your favourite goal? I have to say, for me, it's the header from the edge of the box, reminiscent of that one that Luis Suarez scored for Liverpool back in his heyday.
I tend to agree with you. I probably slightly preferred the first goal just because he goes up against Koulibaly, who is not a small man, and he outjumps him by a lot. And then he also has the mental fortitude to place the ball in the bottom corner. I think his second goal was probably the build-up to it with a fantastic through ball from Theo to Rebic, who then puts in a really good cross. The whole move as a whole, and to be fair, that whole left side for Milan was very impressive throughout the night. So I think the header slightly edges it, but not by a lot.
And that was another Theo ball as well, wasn't it? To Hernandez putting that ball in. Beautiful cross in as well. And then the pinpoint header. That was my favourite one, Oscar.
Good to know.
And if we're mentioning Theo Hernandez at the moment, he's another player who maybe Milan who struggled in the last couple of outings. Maybe it was possible that he was kind of maybe in the shadow a little bit. Possibly teams were paying a little bit more attention to him. But in any case, as Kenny and I were discussing during the game, I felt that he really shone more on the defensive side than on the attacking side, and that's saying something considering he played a big part in 2 of the goals.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Boaz. I think that's the one side of his game that Theo Hernandez has been criticized for perhaps before defensively, and in this game he was absolutely fantastic. I mean, the timing of some of his tackles and the decision making defensively were excellent. So if he adds that to his locker, then a very, very scary prospect. And also we have to mention Donnarumma, who was sensational.
Definitely. I mean, it's crazy to think that Donnarumma is only 20 years old and he's already played, 4 seasons for Milan. At some point during the game, there was some crazy shouts going on, and there was some guy shouting really angrily at Rebic, no, cazzo! And I was thinking, wow, this is like one of the coaches is going mad here. Like considering both Pioli and his deputy were off with the COVID, I was wondering who had the balls on the bench to be so assertive. And then I realized that it was Donnarumma all the way back from goal, being a real leader on the pitch. And I think it's fair to say that not only in terms of salary, but also in terms of importance to the team and leadership, he's definitely in the top 3 players in this squad.
Absolutely. We have to discuss the refereeing decisions. Firstly, the Bakayoko red. Kenny, you had strong views on this one.
Not strong views, but I think that, I mean, it was the second tackle, definitely. I don't think anyone really can argue that it was second yellow. The first one was more debatable. But I think the reason for that is tiredness. I mean, we know that Bakayoko was in bed with a fever in midweek, and I think Gattuso said before the game that he was only planning on giving him 60 minutes. And to me, that looks very much like it looks like mental tiredness, really, to make that challenge, because I don't think Bakayoko, if he's completely with it, I don't think he makes that tackle knowing that he's on a yellow. I think he's a more experienced player than that. And fairness to Gattuso, he was a class act in the post-match press conference. Boaz already mentioned his comments about Zlatan, but Gattuso held his hands up and said I should have taken him off before then, to be honest. And plenty more about Gattuso's post-match press conference to talk about. But let's stick on the refereeing decisions for now.
Yeah, the other one I wanted to highlight was that a lot of Napoli fans thought that Zlatan should have been sent off for the flying elbow. Obviously, Zlatan has a bit of previous for this, was suspended for 3 matches while he was at United for elbowing Tyrone Mings. Did you think this one was intentional, Boaz?
I think when I saw it live, it looked like he was taking up his position and that he jumped way before Koulibaly moved closer to him. When you watch it in super slow replay, it looks much worse than it is. And I think it's one of those yellow/orange cards. But again, you have to say that Koulibaly was not winning that ball in any way possible, and he sticks his head a bit pointlessly. And while we're on the subject of Koulibaly, he went up for 7 aerial challenges in this game, and apparently he didn't win even one of them. It's seriously worrying for Napoli and Napoli fans that the player who was supposedly a Man City target a few years ago, and that De Laurentiis said that it was a shame he didn't sell him for 110 million euros. It looks like his play is really regressing, and that Kostas Manolas on the other side is slightly carrying him. Obviously, the season is still long, and he hasn't had the proper preseason, but maybe someone to keep an eye on right now.
Absolutely. And Kenny, did you want to talk more about the Gattuso's post-match press conference?
Just to say what a class act, really. We talk about managers antics in the post-match press conferences a fair amount on this podcast, and Gattuso was very, very gracious. He said, and he highlighted some of the episodes that we've discussed, but basically was like, no problem. They looked at it on VAR, they came to that conclusion. But more to the point, he said that there's no excuses really. I'm not going to blame bad luck for the performance tonight. We weren't aggressive enough. I believe that we're as good as Milan are, but they seem to believe in themselves more. And I think coupled with the comments on Zlatan and the mea culpa on the Bakayoko sending off, I just think he's a real class act.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was amused by the comments resurfacing in the media, or the instant resurfacing in the media when him and Zlatan were at Milan together, and after a disagreement in training, he was dunked into a wheelie bin by Zlatan. Obviously, impossible to avoid metaphors after the performance that Zlatan gave.
And another small anecdote is that Bonera, who was on the bench for Milan, also played with Gattuso and Zlatan 10 years ago. So all around, a little bit of a reunion.
Absolutely. But what do we think, kind of bigger picture? Do we now consider Milan as title contenders? I know, Kenny, you said at the start of the season you'd expect to see them in the top 4.
Yeah, I think you have to. We're 8 games into the season. After the next game, we'll basically be a quarter of the way in. They've played Roma, who we're going to speak about later on, who by all accounts seem like top 4 contenders at least. They've played Napoli now. They've played the Inter. I think we have to look at the fact that they're 5 points ahead of Inter, 4 points ahead of Juve. But also, I think we have to look at the squad. I don't think this Milan squad is ever given really the credit that it's due. Yes, Zlatan is incredible. Yes, Donnarumma is incredible. Yes, some people talk about Theo Hernandez, but I think that midfield pairing of Kessié and Benasser as well is absolutely fantastic. And yes, Kessié was probably at fault for the Napoli goal. But I just think that you look at this team and they really are looking like a cohesive and an impressive outfit, really. I think they're challengers. I'm not going to go out and say that they're my favourites for the title, but I think we have to talk about top 4 now for Milan. And I think that they've got a very realistic shot at this thing.
As we don't need to ask you as a Milan fan, I know you'd never admit to hope for a title challenge at this point in the season.
All I can say is that I'm far more involved in football now that Milan are in the running than I was when they were just in mid-table obscurity, and I'm not sure which I prefer, to be honest. I've been having a near heart attack every weekend is not doing me any good.
Yeah, never go into management.
Football.
But to tie it up nicely, we started this little Milan segment speaking about Zlatan, who of course went off injured. He'll be off for 15 days apparently, which means he'll miss 3 games. And this is where this squad that we're praising so much, this is where we see how they're going to come together. It has to be said that when Zlatan came off, the average age of the team went down to 23. So that's the youngest team in Europe by far in the top 5 leagues.
Nicely rounded off there, because we do need to move on and talk about Roma, who looked very impressive in a 3-0 win against Parma. Henrik Mkhitaryan once again twice on the score sheet. I mean, it's another team that we need to start considering for the top 4, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think I was probably guilty at the start of the season of saying how disappointing Roma had started. They had the one game written off for the Diawara incident. I think they had a couple of draws early on as well, but they really have been on absolutely sensational form. And you've got to take into account the fact that this game they were without Edin Dzeko, and they're still without Zaniolo, who are probably their 2 biggest stars. But there's quality throughout that team as well. And let's not forget that Mkhitaryan maybe didn't quite do it in the English Premier League, but he was one of Europe's hottest properties before he got there at Borussia Dortmund. So I absolutely think so. And I think the signing of Kumbulla, there's Mancini there, you've got Spinazzola, there's plenty of youth as well. So they're another team that quietly have gone about the business of lowering the average age of the squad. And they really seem to be firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, you mentioned that Dzeko's coming back into the squad. Be interesting to see the kind of role that Mkhitaryan takes up, because we've not really seen him in scoring as many goals in his past clubs. It's always obviously been strong creative force. What do you think, Baz? They're going to be strengthened by Dzeko coming back? Are you worried about Roma as a Milan fan?
I wouldn't say I'm worried about Roma as a Milan fan, but I think we mentioned in the last episode that they're kind of slowly creeping up without anyone really paying much attention to them. Their transfer window was possibly a little bit quiet, but the players they brought in are functional to their game, and their neat interplay has been fantastic. That pass from Spinazzola for the Borja Mayoral goal is just beautiful.
Yeah, incredible.
I'm gonna go out there and give Mkhitaryan a dishonorable mention for even considering taking that shot for the second goal. It's criminal. But then I'm gonna give him an honorable mention for taking that shot, because that was for me the moment of the weekend. It was gorgeous. And you have to also consider that Roma wrapped up this game in about 40 minutes, and that's the stuff of true winning teams, that they can kind of take their foot off the gas but still control the game, save some energy.
Absolutely. Well, we won't dwell on them for too long. We'll let them continue to creep up unnoticed.
Oh, and sorry to say, it's also worth mentioning that the Friedkin brothers have been present at every single game this season, and possibly their presence is a calming influence, and it looks like they're going about their business in the right way. They're not as showy as past owners, and I think it's been, the results are proving their methods right.
It's a freaking good point.
We hadn't had a freaking good anything for a few episodes.
It was the only reason I mentioned them.
Yeah. So the last game that we're going to talk about in this part is Inter Torino. Ended up Inter 4, Torino 2, but Torino were 2-0 up at one point in this game. They started really well, didn't they, Kenny? What did you make of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to say, so we all know what the final score was, but the first thing to say is that Torino are improving. This is, at the start of the season, they really weren't doing much going forward. They were an absolute shambles defensively. They're definitely improving. And to be honest, Inter were pretty appalling for the first hour of this game, but equally Torino could have had a lot more. Zaza in particular had plenty of opportunities. I think I had to look at the stats just before we started recording. He had seven efforts in the game. He was really a live spark, particularly in the first half. But yeah, I mean, there is this overarching sort of theme of Torino throwing away what appear to be commanding victories. I know commanding positions. I know that there was the Sassuolo game, the Lazio game. I mean, it seems to possibly be developing into a habit.
I read somewhere that they've dropped 14 points from leading positions, and that's in just 8 games thus far. So it's a really bad habit to have, and especially in a Serie A that is particularly competitive this season.
Yeah, I'm sure. I accept what you're saying, but I do think they were a bit unlucky on the penalty. I don't know. Wanted to know what you guys made of this, because we actually got a question from a listener. Ricky Martin was asking, how is that not offside? And I've watched it a few times. I've read the rules. I can't figure it out. It seems to me that Hakimi was coming back from an offside position, and therefore a penalty shouldn't be given.
So for anyone who hasn't seen it, there's a long ball that comes in, and Nkulo chests it down and kind of miscontrols it. And then when he tries to get control of it again, he hits Hakimi's leg, who in the meantime was offside. I think the interpretation of the rule is that as soon as Nkulo touches it, it begins a new passage of play, and therefore him hacking Hakimi down is considered a foul. In theory, Nkulo would have been better off to just let the ball go out or hit Hakimi, and that would have been the offside that you're asking for. Having said that, I'm not too clear about the rules myself. I felt it was an offside when I saw it, but people who are a little bit more knowledgeable than us seem to think that we are wrong.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah, I've kind of done the flip. I've done the reverse of Boaz. I saw it and I thought, yeah, he controls the ball at that point. It's not like a deflection or anything. It's he actually tries to take the ball under control, and therefore he plays him onside. But unarguably, you're right, Oscar. He does he makes a motion to play the ball, and therefore becomes effective, and it doesn't really matter. It's at the point, but the rules seem to suggest it's at the point that he makes the move to play up the ball from an offside position. But what Boaz said as well, I've heard people on Italian radio explain why this very definitely was. I think it's just yet another example of tinkering with the offside rule constantly, and it gets to the point where it becomes difficult to keep up, really.
I think the same people Kenny is talking about on Italian radio are very keen to keep controversy down to a minimum right now with football, because they don't want any additional drama. So they're very quick to sweep any controversy under the carpet.
Yeah, it's probably a fair point.
The only slightly vague part of the ruling I could find is that it does say that if there's a player in an offside position moving towards the ball with the intention of playing the ball, but has not yet started attempting to play the ball, and they are fouled, then the foul takes place before the offside. But I don't think you can argue really that Hakimi has not started attempting to play the ball. I mean, he's right there in between the ball and Nkulu. How's that not attempting to play the ball? But yeah, there is a slight grey area in the rules.
But yeah, I would say even within that, the question is, what is attempting to play the ball? Is it making a move to play the ball, as in running in the direction of the ball, or is it the point that he actually makes a movement with his leg or whatever part of his body he's moving to play the ball with?
I think either way, it's
And maybe if Nkulu doesn't take this touch, perhaps we wouldn't be talking about this whole incident. So maybe, like we've said in the past, a lot of controversy would be avoided if the player was slightly more switched on.
Yeah, fair enough. And excellently taken penalty by Lukaku as well. That's all we've got time for in this half. We'll just do a couple of honourable mentions and then wrap it up and take part two. Kenny, you had one for Lazio's pilot. Nice change of pace.
Yeah, so a bit of an odd one, this one, but it involves the Lazio plane, which has been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons over the last couple of weeks. But apparently the weather was so bad flying to the Crotone game that, according to Immobile, who was giving an interview after the victory, all of the staff and players on board basically feared for their lives. There is a funny caveat with this, which is that he said that Acerbi, Parolo, and there's a Lazio director as well. Apparently they weren't too bothered, but he did caveat it by saying that Parolo's an absolute maniac and he views flights as fairground rides or something.
And Acerbi is ultra Christian, so I guess he believes he's in the hands of God, whatever happens.
Yeah, possibly. But yeah, basically the plane had to circle multiple times apparently before landing, and conditions were deemed so dangerous that it wasn't actually allowed to take off again after the game. Apparently the players were lining up afterwards to sort of congratulate and thank the pilot afterwards. It has to be noted that the weather conditions that we actually saw in the game kind of perhaps give us some context for this. There's absolutely no way that this game should have gone ahead, in my view. It was more like water polo than football.
I've had games where I've played where the pitch was in better conditions than that, and the referee has called it off. I don't understand how in a major league that pitch was acceptable.
It's crazy. They must just be in a rush, I think, they don't want to call any game off. They're going to play at all costs. But I particularly enjoyed Immobile's diving header when he went flying for about 30 meters afterwards, just skimming along the surface. That looked like fun, but I can't imagine it was the safest conditions to play in.
And there's the Lazio playing. We also mentioned it last week with the infamous Luis Alberto quotes. It's been in the news for other reasons this week. First of all, there was a video from the aforementioned flight that was leaked by one of the players, and apparently they're going to find who it is and fine him. But also there was a video by one of the ground staff at Fiumicino who was filming the plane and saying how shit it was and how bits were missing and how it was like how Lazio were ripped off. Clearly a Roma fan, but very amusing. And Fiumicino said that they will find who it is and will fire him. But still, I mean, Lazio were probably better off just buying this plane and not telling anyone about it.
I think this plane's going to be the gift that keeps on giving. It's almost becoming like Airplane 3. They only did 2 airplane movies, didn't they? So I think it's going to be good value.
Yeah. Well, in any case, it was worth the trip. They came out 2-0 winners away at Crotone. That's all we've got time for in this segment. Boaz is waving at me very quickly. What is it?
We've mentioned Zlatan quite a lot in this segment, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to give him a dishonorable or an honorable for this. But basically, he's come out against FIFA. He tweeted earlier today, "Who gave FIFA EA Sports permission to use my name or my face? FIFPro. I'm not aware of being a member of FIFPro, and if I was, it's without any real knowledge and through some weird maneuver. And for sure, I never allowed FIFA.com or FIFPro to make money using me." So Zlatan knows what he's talking about right now.
Yeah, well, be interesting to see how that one plays out. Maybe he's trying to get everyone to play pairs or something.
Well, this links to the story that he bought all his teammates PS5. So I'm not sure what game he's planning on them playing if they're not allowed to play with his likelihood.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Baz. That is all we've got time for in this segment. We'll be back soon.
Hello, Serie A fan. Make Scudetto a part of your weekly football fix. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favourite listening platform, and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at ScudettoPod. We'd love to have you on the squad.
Hello and welcome back to part 2, where we'll round up all the rest of the Serie A action. First of all, though, let's check in on the beers, or rather the beer. Kenny, how are you getting on with your mango IPA?
It's not quite the same drinking alone, is it?
We're all drinking.
Yeah.
I'm drinking, and I'm drinking a good beer as well.
As you've reviewed that beer before, I'm not accepting it.
Just because you buy beers that seemingly someone bought a thesaurus and went through like 100 pages before naming it doesn't mean we're not drinking beers.
Anyway, Kenny, how's yours?
My disco forklift truck. It's absolutely lovely, actually. It's. I'm not going to say I'm staying away from really nice, but it is absolutely lovely. It's got a little bit of hop, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting it to taste maybe too fruity. It's got, you can definitely taste the mango, but it's got a bit of bitterness to it as well. It's really lovely.
Okay, Boaz, I'm not having you review the same beer twice, even if you do claim that it tastes different this time around. So it's time to move on to
what
the
about
football.
The gin and tonic? Do we not get a review of your gin and tonic?
It was not the best gin and tonic because I only had one ice cube.
Right.
I
think that's your fault rather than the gins or the tonics. So.
I haven't told you the brand of the gin or the tonic, so I'm not really reviewing anything except my own skill in making it.
Let's move on.
I didn't have any lime either. Juve back to winning ways. 2-0 victory over Cagliari. They seem to be clicking now that Ronaldo's back, don't they, Kenny?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think we kind of expected this to happen. Maybe we expected it to happen a little bit before. But Arthur in midfield as well is really coming into his game. And that, Ronaldo, Morata, Kulusevski is looking great. I think Juve have given everyone a head start, but much as I said that Milan are probably, have to be considered title contenders, I think at this point Juve are probably looking like the favourites.
Yeah, definitely can't write them off, can we? Although I guess we should mention that Cagliari were affected by COVID, had a few notable absentees, didn't they?
This was going to be I think it was going to be the 34th time Godin and Ronaldo would have come up one against the other, with Ronaldo just edging it in terms of wins. But of course, Diego Godin caught COVID while off with Uruguay and therefore did not play the game. Cagliari obviously severely missed him. And also, it looked like they weren't really at the races, which helps if you're Juventus.
I think Cagliari were quite well organised for large parts of this, and they were difficult to break down, and perhaps Juve were playing a bit in front of them. But certainly I think once they sort of got going, and once they got in front, really, there was no way that Cagliari were getting back into this one.
Yeah, either way, Juve back on track for their title challenge. Atalanta, another team tipped by some as a title challenger this season, have dropped another 2 points to Spezia. But Spezia looking a bit better. I mean, they keep picking up points, don't they, Kenny?
They do. They just keep picking up points. Like you said, disappointing first half in particular from Atalanta. This one, they looked a lot better in the second half. Arguably they should have won the game, really. But there was obviously the goal from Gozens that was disallowed, but also a couple of occasions where Pasalic really should have put the ball away. But yeah, it has to be, I absolutely agree with you. It has to be said, Spezia were, as I said previously for Cagliari, but Spezia were really well organised, really energetic, really industrious, and they do keep on picking up points. I would say at this point, I'm probably letting go of the title potential for Atalanta. I think now they just need to try and cement that Champions League spot for the third year, and that's going to be a tall order. But that I definitely can see them, doing still. They do need to turn it on at some point, and I think they will.
Yeah. Well, either way, I'm looking forward to seeing them at Anfield tomorrow night. That'll be an interesting test. Sorry, it's not tomorrow night. It's on Wednesday, isn't it?
It'll be tomorrow for the listeners.
Be tomorrow for listeners. Good point. Anyway, moving on to the so-called hipster derby. Sassuolo took all 3 points at Verona. What do we make of that one, Boaz?
Very impressive win for Sassuolo with a few caveats. Hellas Verona hit the woodwork on 4 different occasions, and Juric went off very, very pissed off. You'd think that on a different game, on a different night, they might have at least got a draw. Berardi continued his fantastic form from the midweek national team break, scoring a very good goal. And overall, as De Zerbi said, Sassuolo being top for a few hours, that's not their aim, but they continue to want to grow. And I think it's a nice story. And if you look at the table, all the clubs who are at the top at the moment, you'd have to say that they deserve to be there, or you expect them to be there. So it's nice to have Sassuolo in that Atalanta role, could I say.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they do against Inter. I believe that's who they've got next up.
That's the next one.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, that could be the point at which we really see Sassuolo stake a claim for top 4. Alternatively, it could be the point at which they kind of sort of start slipping out of contention. But yeah, they're doing great, and we have to mention Boga's goal as well. It was the Boga of last season. I'm not sure how many of those he scored last season, but he appears to be back fighting fit after his spell out from COVID, which we did speak about in a previous pod, so we shouldn't dwell on that too much. But fantastic goal.
He's a lovely player.
Good stuff. And just before we move on to honourable and dishonourable mentions, we should also mention, it seems like the league is nearing agreement with CVC, a deal for a 10% stake in the league. The clubs have apparently unanimously approved the 1.7 billion buyout. So sounds like there's some upfront cash there to help the league through in this
much
period.
Needed.
Yeah, definitely in these times.
Absolutely. So we're waiting for official confirmation of that. Maybe we can bring you a bit more on it.
If what the newspapers are reporting is correct, the clubs managed to get more money than was expected from this deal. So really good news for Italian football all around, especially as you said, in a time when there is no fans in the stadium and funds are kind of hard to come by.
Yeah, there were some pretty scary figures put out by, I think it was Gazzetta dello Sport, of the shortfall in Serie A. I think there were only about 3 clubs who weren't in a precarious situation, really. So yeah, the sooner that money comes in, the better it is for the clubs and for the league as a whole. And hopefully we can look forward to getting back to normality, and then the Italian league can hopefully reach its potential once again.
Absolutely. Kenny, just moving on to the honourable mentions now, we didn't get a chance to speak about the Fiorentina game, but you had an honourable mention for Prandelli.
Yeah, I mean, I think the less said about the game, the better, to be honest. But 1-0 loss to Benevento. This is an honourable mention for Prandelli, not for the performance that Fiorentina put in, which wasn't an improvement in any meaningful way, but just for his post-match honesty. He said, I've noted it down here, he said that any emotions I had about returning are now irrelevant. I'm bitterly disappointed with the performance. There's a huge amount of work to do. At the first sign of difficulty, the team becomes timid and they start playing as individuals. I'm worried about the fragility. This is a side that has to learn how to become a team. And the reason that I wanted to say that is because it's very refreshing after what we heard Iachini saying, in presser after presser, that Prandelli at least is saying what the rest of us can plainly see. Also has to be mentioned, Prandelli has had next to no time with the squad, so we can't judge him harshly on the result either.
Yeah, he's certainly not wrong. And as you mentioned earlier, saying what everyone except for Iachini seemed to already know. Boaz, on the other end of the managerial spectrum, you've got an honourable for Gasperini.
Yeah, despite Gasperini being having a bit of a tough time on the pitch at the moment, he was nominated as Coach of the Year alongside Klopp, Thomas Tuchel, and Hansi Flick, and a few others. I mean, he's the only Italian representative in that list, and I think it's deserved for the last season Atalanta had.
Kenny, you got another one for us?
Yeah, so this is in part, I think, because we sort of breezed over the Juventus game when perhaps we should have given it a little bit more. An honourable mention for Demiral and De Ligt in the heart of that defence. Bonucci and Chiellini not missed. Well, they weren't as missed as perhaps people would have expected them to be. This was De Ligt's, I think, first game of this season. So yeah, good to see him back, and very assured performance there by those two.
Absolutely. Baz, you had an honourable mention.
And this is my final honourable mention, and it goes out to Gianpaolo Pazzini, who has announced that he's retiring. It's quite fitting for this pod because he played for the likes of Atalanta, Fiorentina, Sampdoria, Inter, Milan, and Verona, and so they're all clubs that we actually mentioned. But anyways, after a long career and I believe 4 goals for the Azzurri as well, he decided to retire after not renewing his contract with Verona last year. He's one of those Serie A faces that you kind of knew he was around, and with his trademark not safe for work goal celebration, and he was known as Il Pazzo, the madman. So we lose a great nickname along with a decent Serie A player. Good personality.
Still got plenty of madmen around though.
Definitely. But no one doing that celebration.
Anyway, that is all we've got time for this week. Please do subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your audio. Until then, enjoy the football. We'll speak to you soon.
Che sta decretando lo scudetto del Milan in questo preciso istante. La Juventus è campione d'Italia questa data, il 6 maggio. Di anticipo, la Roma è campione d'Italia per la stagione 2000-2001.